Reclaimed, a podcast that dares to ask the question, is there a better way to live this chapter of our lives? A few years ago now, early in my midlife chapter, I experienced a life-changing burnout. A burnout that made me question my career as a psychologist, my relationships, but also the culture in which I live in, which celebrated or seemed to celebrate this busy hustle culture. So this catapulted me into a midlife course correction. And something that I continue to be on a journey on in terms of reclaiming and creating my midlife. And I'd love you to join in with me. Here we'll question the life-draining systems that exist in our society, and we will open up to our vulnerability with open hearts to find real lasting change. I will open up and share some of my vulnerability, as well as guests who choose to do the same, but also share practical wisdom from my profession, but also from other professions to help guide you with the wisdom needed to explore this chapter of your life and create it the way that you need to. I believe midlife is an opportunity to look in, to discover what is truly satisfying, fulfilling for you, and making those changes along the way. So if you're ready to call out what's broken, connect to your vulnerability like it's a superpower, and reclaim what is truly authentic for you, then you're in the right place. This is Midlife Reclaimed. Let's challenge the status quo, shape a better future for this chapter in our lives, one brave, courageous step at a time. Engaging in this podcast does not intend to create, nor does it create, a therapist and client relationship between you and myself. All the wisdom shared by myself or the guests is general in nature and not intended for your personal circumstances. As I have done for myself, I encourage those who are in distress to seek professional support. If you are in a life-threatening situation, please call your national emergency services. And if you're in need of urgent counselling, please contact any available national telephone services in your nation, or see your doctor as soon as possible. Stay safe, and please remember that you do not need to do this alone. Hey there, Shannon Swales, the host and creator of Midlife Reclaimed. Welcome to, if this is your first time, or welcome back. In this solo episode today, we are talking about a very important topic, vulnerability. Now, vulnerability and I haven't always been friends, and I know I'm not alone in that. A lot of us struggle to be vulnerable. And I wanted to make this a topic because it is actually essential for midlife, and particularly to grow in our midlife, or grow in any time in our life, to be vulnerable. So strap yourself in. Don't, even if you're finding, oh my God, this feels icky, see if you can sit with that discomfort and choose to come along and be open to hearing and exploring vulnerability in midlife and what that might look like or be like for you. Let's start by clarifying what it is that we mean by vulnerability. Like, what is this thing called vulnerability? Now, I'm going to turn to the wisdom of a researcher / social worker in America called Brené Brown. Now, hopefully I have it correct that that's her profession, but she's very big researcher, done a lot of work in vulnerability, has a TED Talk out there called The Power of Vulnerability. That's millions and millions of views. I think that's where I first came across her. Anyway, if you don't know about her, I really do recommend looking her up. So I'm going to draw on her wisdom and turn to my notes where I've written that. But she defines vulnerability as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. She goes on to say that contrary to popular belief, it is not weakness, but it is our most accurate measure of courage. And when we ask ourselves, are we willing to show up and be seen when we can't control the outcome. Basically, in this, we are tapping into the essence of what it means to be truly brave. And this makes me think like I used to think courage, being brave, meant the absence of fear, that it meant someone who's confident to, face their demons and do what it is they want to do, like say their piece, speak their mind, or whatever it might be. I actually knew from my psychology training that that wasn't the true definition of courage, but that's what was really deep in my soul and what I had observed and learned from my early life experiences. And it wasn't till my burnout experience and some people saying that I was being courageous when I was sharing my story, sharing my vulnerability about, everything and risk that outcome, like how people would see me. And I certainly felt a lot of anxiety and fear and shame and guilt about how people might see me or did see me. But that I didn't see that that was courageous because I was still stuck in that deep-seated mindset that, well, I was anxious, I was fearful, you know, there was a lot of discomfort with that. But as I've come to learn that being vulnerable and acting without that certainty or control of outcome, risking is courageous, and that's part of being vulnerable. So hopefully that's making a bit more sense about what vulnerability is. I'll make sure in the show notes that I'll leave links to Brené Brown's TED Talk on the power of vulnerability, because it's a really good one. And probably a link also to a couple of her books that go into that as well. She's got many. I've read them all. So now that we know what vulnerability is, I want to talk about how vulnerability is a pathway to strength and resilience. So embracing vulnerability can fundamentally reshape our lives. I know I've done it. I continue to do it. It's a continual practice. I'm not always there, but try to practice embracing my vulnerability, and it truly does reshape our lives. To bring you back to Brené Brown's work, and I'm going to refer to my notes here, rather than a liability, vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. It's interesting as I read out those things: joy, love, creativity, empathy, and what was the other one? Belonging. I can't believe I forgot that one. That vulnerability is the birthplace of that, which when I was the years and years before my burnout, whilst I was certainly more aware of my feelings maybe, but I was not engaging in actions of vulnerability. In fact, I was, keeping myself safe. And what I noticed is that I didn't feel the sense of belonging. I certainly didn't feel connected to joy or creativity. Whilst I experience love, I don't feel, well, I now know with the experience that I feel of love with being more vulnerable within my relationships, it's a lot deeper. So it's just really interesting that the more vulnerable we are, or the more actions of vulnerability, we have the opportunity to feel joy, a sense of belonging, a sense of creativity, all those things. It blows my mind. This very thing that I was like, oh, got to keep, no, don't express emotionally, don't risk it all, don't jump into the abyss and uncertainty, just stay on the safe ground, was actually doing me harm. So just to recap where we're at. Vulnerability is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. We have also learnt that it is the pathway to strength and resilience. Those things like joy, creativity, blah. I've said them, I think, 100 times now, because it just blows me away. But it's not a necessarily easy path, right? So let's turn to focus a little bit on that. So, first, the societal and cultural pressures on midlife women. Let's take a look at that. It's really important to acknowledge that as midlife women, all women, often a lot of the cultural and societal pressures are on women to be caregivers, to be nurturers and emotional supporters of others, whether it's their children, their co-workers, their friends, their partner, that their parents, that it's often our role in society to be the emotional support of others. Now, our own vulnerability, then, our own emotional expression, our own needs, and expressing those, taking that risk, uncertainty can get squashed in those pressures to fill those roles. So often, not knowingly, that we suppress our own emotions, our own needs, because of that service, that role that we have found ourselves in, that doesn't create much space or room for our own stuff. Now, I'm sure that is to no surprise to the midlife women that I'm talking to out there, especially Gen X, but even some millennials, that we were raised at a time where that caregiving role, that nurturing role was definitely reinforced. Yeah, and often not, like outwardly, but, certainly infused in a lot of things in what we saw. So, when we talk about embracing vulnerability, particularly for midlife women, we're really asking you to basically be cultural shapers and just not shove that aside, but certainly bringing in your needs and your emotional expression in it. So, rather than it being about everybody else, so really challenging those norms. I also want to make a note and a link here to burnout with this, that we do know when our emotions are suppressed, whether it's due to societal norms and pressures and the roles that we need to take and caregiving at our work, in our home, because let's face it, women do most of the jobs that are caregiving in nature, that yes, we're more at risk of burnout because emotional expression rather than emotional suppression is what will help prevent burnout as well, or part of it. So, yeah, just wanted to make that really important. I noticed in my own experience that whilst I'm not a mum, so I don't have that role and the pressure from that to take that emotional load in the family, I am married though, and I also chose a profession where I am there for others. I am a caregiver. And so that role certainly played out in my marriage, but also in my work, definitely, where I showed up and I was there and present for others, and overextended myself and took that emotional load. I started to notice as I was waking up to it that, and I continue to wake up to my behavioral patterns in my marriage, that there would be certain things I would do to protect my partner's emotions. He never asked me to, but that I would, you know, I might, for example, not ask him to do something, even though I needed and I wanted that I knew that that wasn't going to be, or I assumed, sometimes correctly, that wouldn't be something that he would want to do. So to protect his emotional experience, I just took it on myself. So there was those little things, and I even find myself still doing it today. Like we've got two dogs, and my husband is not as patient as I can be with them. And like I might go to quieten the dogs or something, or take over and help settle them. And then I'm like, well, no, hang on, not my role. He's an adult. He can deal with his, difficulty with patients and help regulate himself so he can be the parent he wants to be to those dogs. So I'm learning to continually learning to back off. But just to demonstrate there that those cultural societal pressures and the patterns that have been sort of crept into us, the roles to play, but then also, it's up to us and our responsibility to break that. Like, we don't have to, once we become awakened to them, we don't have to continue to play those roles. Yes, they might have consequences. I see my dogs, not so happy. I mean, they're not in harm's way. Like, if they're in harm's way, I'd definitely jump in to protect them, but they're not. But it's like, and sometimes I do point out his behavior at times and just go, hey, but I don't take over. So, we can change our behaviors, as well, where it's safe to do so and the others are safe too. Hopefully that's making sense. Now I want to bring the discussion into midlife, and particularly midlife transitions and the role of vulnerability. So, as I mentioned before, midlife is quite a unique period, and often a period of reevaluation and self-discovery, or it can be if we wish. It's often a time where we're questioning our roles or where we are in life, and exploring different dimensions or new dimensions of our identity. And drawing on human developmental theorist Erik Erikson, which he brought these 7 stages of human development. I think it was 7, but the one in the midlife is called generativity, probably pronounced that wrong, versus stagnation. So what he means by this is midlife is often about a couple of things, like it's the giving to the next generation, so giving back, but it's also about discovering our own meaning and purpose as well. And I see this a lot in practice, that a lot of women find themselves in midlife, and and it was for me too, just kind of going, okay, I'm here. Is this where I want to be? Like, is this was it ever where I wanted to be? Is this truly what's meaningful and purposeful to me? And that was both in my relationships, but also in particularly my work and where I wanted to go. And I thought that was definitely with being burnt out, being influenced by that. But what I've come to know as I recovered from burnout was that it was also this midlife sort of reevaluation and really sort of connecting to what is meaningful and purposeful, and that being more important rather than achievement, and making everyone else happy, or what I thought I needed to do, society-wise, for example. So where vulnerability comes into this is that when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and really truly connect to our inner self and really notice what we're experiencing emotionally, which takes that vulnerability to be with and to start to express that, to whoever we need to, in order to help make those shifts and those changes, because there's a lot of uncertainty and risk about whether those changes are going to pan out. And I remember being really aware of that, like, okay, especially when I started to build my own business, I was like, I'm 42 or 43, I can't remember at the time, like, oh my God, is this really a time to, not that I saw it as starting again, but reinventing my work life. So, there's a lot of risk and uncertainty, and really connecting and being able to be with my emotional experience in a way that didn't hold me back, but also risking it with sharing those dreams and those hopes and desires with others as well, which was risky too, because what will they think, particularly my partner, because it's meant, a lot of financial challenges as well. So yeah, not easy. However, but sharing our emotions authentically can lead to, and sharing what we want, really knowing what we want, can lead to improved relationships, improved work situations, creating more of a support network around you too. And of course, easing that stress that can come from, and I see this with a lot of people's burnout, can come from that disconnection from what is really truly meaningful and purposeful to us, and the spaces that we're in, whether that can truly be achieved as well, or the roles that we're in. So yes, yeah. Hey, midlife women, just a small interruption of this episode to let you know about a vital resource that I have created called the Midlife Reclaimed membership. This is not just another resource hub, but it's a compassionate community that I have built exclusively for midlife women who are burnt out and ready to break free and embrace a renewed sense of purpose. Imagine a safe space where you can connect with like-minded women, share your journey, and access practical tools and knowledge to help you grow and thrive. In our community, I personally lead monthly masterclasses and QA sessions, sharing guided practices, a rich library of resources, and effective strategies to help you work with your energy, replenish it, set healthy boundaries, and create a life that truly is aligned with your needs. As I often remind myself, burnout can be our biggest teacher if we pause long enough to listen, to hear her wisdom, and to learn and grow from those who can support us to move in the direction that will help us reclaim our midlife. And here's the best part. If you join before the 31st of March 2025, you'll enjoy fantastic membership pricing. So if you're ready to break that isolation and the stigma of burnout and start nurturing your growth in a supportive community, please visit www.burnoutspsychologysupport.com/midlife-reclaimed-membership to learn more and to join our supportive community. Let's reclaim our midlife together. So shifting now to some practical strategies to help support vulnerability, to help us grow and transform or shift or whatever you want to call it in our midlife. I've already mentioned that vulnerability is hard. It's not easy to take risks, to do something without the certainty of outcome, and to express emotionally. And the funny thing is, it just jumped in my brain, and I remember learning about this, that even if we're not choosing vulnerability, we are vulnerable. And anyone who thinks other is excuse me, but kidding themselves, because even if we're trying to control and find certainty, we live in uncertainty. There aren't guaranteed outcomes, right? We're not even guaranteed that we'll be alive tomorrow, right? Even if we have a stable job, there's always the risks that we might not have the job in a week's time. Let's say the company goes down the girdler, goes bankrupt. That even if we're not expressing or acknowledging our emotions, we are human, therefore we're feeling. So whether or not you choose to be vulnerable, you are vulnerable. So wouldn't it be great if we chose to be vulnerable? Like, took more awareness and, I was about to say control, but that harnessed this in a more conscious way. Anyway, just my 2 bobs worth there. So there's a few things that I want to talk to about, some strategies around helping you embrace vulnerability. The 2 that have been really good friends of mine, and I know that sounds a bit woohoo, but they're just, yeah, my right-hand man, so to say, or person, and that is self-compassion and mindfulness. And these are 2 things that I had prior to burning out, but hadn't really practiced and really integrated on the deeper level for myself. So I did a lot of work around that during my healing recovery days. So self-compassion is the action, the choice of, really putting it it's being your own best friend. And again, that might sound a little bit, woohoo, but essentially it is. But if you're wanting to get down into it, it is, I'm drawing on compassion focused therapy, which is a approach developed by Dr. Paul Gilbert from the UK, that they define compassion as the noticing of suffering in another or self, and choosing to take action to alleviate or support that suffering. So it's that witnessing, noticing of your human experience. So it could be all those feelings, those emotions, the sense of risk and uncertainty, all that vulnerability that one may feel in the pursuit of something, and doing it anyway. But it's that choice to the other part of compassion that is focused on self, is about choosing to do something to help alleviate or support that suffering. Often we can't get rid of it, because remember when I was talking about vulnerability earlier, we can still feel that fear and that anxiety. We can have thoughts that I don't like, uncertainty, this is really risky. We can have all that and still walk into the fire, still follow that direction that's important to us, like building a business or sharing one's burnout story. That all of that can be happening inside of us. We can't control that humanness, that vulnerability, but we can choose how we alleviate or support that. And that's where mindfulness and self-compassion is so important, because they are ways to really teach us to be with, to support our suffering in the pursuit of something that is of value. So mindfulness teaches us to be really present, to connect with our body, our mind, in a way that is curious rather than judgmental. So we get out of our thinking mind where judgment lies, or analysis, or all those wonderful thinking qualities and decision making, all that, but we step into noticing curiously what's showing up in our body without any need to change or get rid of it. And that compassion, that self-compassion, is we learn ways to be able to respond to it that's empathic, that is caring in nature, that is empowering as well. It might even be connecting with someone who has those qualities that can support us in our vulnerability as well. So self-compassion and mindfulness are essential friends on your road to embracing vulnerability in your midlife. So I highly recommend those two skills. But also building safe spaces. Not every space is safe. And I'm often talking about this with clients. Some workplaces aren't, some people, leaders aren't, some systems aren't safe to be vulnerable in. So looking to or creating spaces that are, and it might look like support groups, where our vulnerability is received in a way that feels safe. So it's respected, it's acknowledged, it's not judged, that you're empowered even, to do better or whatever it might be, or encouraged. So safe spaces are really compassionate spaces where we can share our vulnerability without shame. So it might be looking for or creating our own support groups. It might look like taking a brave step with a good friend or a partner that shows some of these qualities, and taking that leap with some self-compassion and mindfulness to share your vulnerability, share your emotions, your needs, risking that reaction. And it makes me think of when I spoke to my parents and shared that I left my career, that I was severely burnt out, that I didn't know where I was going to do or what I was going to do, what I was going to do, where I was going to go. And I really feared their judgment, even though part of me knew that they would be there for me, that they wouldn't, they wouldn't judge, that they would support me. I know they would be worried about me, but it was more fear of their judgment. And lo and behold, they weren't. And I have gotten braver and braver and being a lot more real and sharing with them my feelings. And I really feel like we talked about before, that often helps relationships to grow closer, where the other person, of course, is a safe other or safe enough. And neither myself or my parents are perfect, but that's not what it's about. We're all doing the best with what we have, but they were able to make space and receive what I felt without question or judgment. More concern, yes, but I knew, where that was coming from. So yeah, hopefully that helps bring up a little bit more about, even the spaces that people we already have. It might be taking that leap of faith and giving it a go, being vulnerable with them and seeing where that goes. I mean, proof's in the pudding, right? If they react in a very judgmental way or something where like repeatedly and it doesn't feel safe, it's like, well, where they're at, and so that's not a person that you go to. And like I said, it could be professional, it could be support groups, it can be therapy as well, a therapist. So yeah, options. But the other one I just want to talk to here with strategies to help with embracing your vulnerability in midlife, particularly in those transitions and the ups and downs, is setting boundaries as well. So, like with embracing vulnerability, it doesn't mean oversharing or needing to share with everyone what's going on for you, but more discerning for yourself who is a person that shows safe enough qualities for me to share my vulnerability. So maybe they show that they're willing to listen and they're there enough. Maybe they're showing that they keep turning up and wanting to be there for you. Again, it might not look perfect. No one, it never does, and that's okay. We've got to be very mindful of our expectations of others. But they're shown enough that they have got these abilities to be there in our vulnerability and to not judge. Or if we were to, and I encourage this, if they were to act in a way that didn't feel safe, that if you were to be vulnerable and say, hey, that wasn't okay, that there's someone who's demonstrated that they can receive feedback and will act on changing, even if it might take a while, and we're human, it takes a while to change, but that they show those abilities too, that they will take on feedback and they'll do their best to change. And I know with my partner that he had certainly over the years that we've been together demonstrated those capabilities. And so I knew, even though there was a lot of fear about sharing what was truly going on inside of me, I took the leap and was vulnerable and continue to be really vulnerable in sharing in our relationships. And again, that has brought us closer. And whenever I've said, hey, what you said wasn't nice or okay, he has been able to demonstrate to, take that on board and do better. And same with me as well. I've gotten better at receiving feedback too, because I was never really good with that. So there you go. Like with practical strategies, we're looking at self-compassion, mindfulness, setting boundaries, and creating, building safe spaces or recognizing the safe spaces. So I hope that's helping, because we now know what vulnerability is. We now know it's a really important part of midlife and helping with the transitions. We know it can help build resilience and uh, strengthen relationships and things like that. So it's really empowering for us to embrace our vulnerability, but needing strategies and help in being able to cross that path, and allowing ourselves, consciously choosing to be vulnerable. What I want to leave you with is that vulnerability is a catalyst for growth. It's actually, I think, a necessity for growth. Without vulnerability, yeah, we might grow, but we won't grow as far as we would if we embrace our vulnerability. I really truly believe that, because I grew a lot in my younger years and my 20s and 30s. And yes, I was vulnerable in those times, but I played it safe a lot. My fear ran my life, so I kept in the safe zone a lot, that I wasn't truly risking it. I wasn't truly stepping into myself. I wasn't truly connected to who I truly was, because whilst I was playing, and I often look back, and a lot of us do, I was masking. I was a lot of the time pretending and playing a role that wasn't really mine. So I wasn't being truly myself. But whilst I was doing that, and I wasn't my true self, even though I wasn't conscious of it's more, we feel more protected. But when we're truly ourselves and we step into that authentic, we often feel more vulnerable because this is who we are. And if people, when we get attacked or whatever based on being who we are, it's so much more vulnerable. However, the flip side is that when we live more authentically, we grow in so many ways. And certainly, from a burnout perspective and dealing with life's ups and downs, authenticity is certainly a better road. And whilst we can't stop, the risks of people hating on us or leaving us, we can always come back to our strategies and our support, our safe supports, and creating that, our compassion for self, our mindful awareness, and tend to our own hurt and emotions in that. But to live true to ourselves, like Brené Brown said earlier, that we become more like aligned with a sense of belonging. We feel more connection to joy, creativity, closeness in relationships. I mean, hello, and away from burnout or other I believe mental health, whether depression or anxiety as well. I know it's not the cure-all, but it's certainly a component, and I'm hoping by joining this discussion of the power of vulnerability today and, drawing on the wisdom of others and sharing that with you, and bringing my own personal experiences of being vulnerable and continuing to be vulnerable, helps you reflect on your relationship with vulnerability and where you might need some support or help to help you towards being able to express that in your safe spaces. So thank you so much for tuning in and listening. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Please feel free to share in the comments if there's that option in your wherever you're listening or watching this podcast. If you're watching it on the YouTube, feel free to comment. Love to hear what my listeners or people watching are finding helpful. And please feel free to share if there's a follow-up question that you'd like answered on a future solo episode. Please don't hesitate to let me know in the comments. And all my contact details are in the show notes as well, so you can reach me that way. Anyway, take care of you. Bye for now. Thank you for joining me on Midlife Reclaimed. I am Shannon Swales, and I hope the conversation today sparks some ideas, helps support you along your way in reclaiming your midlife. Now, if you'd like to stay connected, and we encourage you to do so, please subscribe, hit that subscribe button, and stay in contact with Midlife Reclaimed episodes. You can also follow us on social media under Shannon A. Swales. And also, if you want to dive deeper into this and be part of a community, check out our Midlife Reclaimed membership. The link is in the show notes. Now, before you go, please remember that if you're feeling overwhelmed, distressed, seek professional support. This podcast, whilst delivers valuable content, it is general in nature, is not a replacement for therapist-client relationships. So we, from the bottom of our heart, encourage you to seek that support. We're not meant to do this alone. Let's reclaim our midlife together, one courageous, bold step at a time. Take care of you. Bye for now.